All right, everybody. Well, good morning, day or evening to you. We're really so glad to have you here for today's October 11th webinar for this academic year's series, which is called Surfacing and Spanning Boundaries in Collaborative Knowledge Making. We're really excited to welcome Dr. Pips Veazey today, who directs the University of Maine Gateway, which you'll be hearing a good deal about, I expect, today. And her talk today is entitled Spanning Boundaries, Creating Sparks and Reimagining the Future of Research Universities. So I love hearing from Pips about her ideas. A couple of things just for context, because I know that Pips won't brag on herself thoroughly. Prior to accepting the director's position that she has now, she served as principal investigator for the Alaska Experimental Program to stimulate competitive research. She also led and co-created the University of Alaska Fairbanks visualization space. She was one of the first people on earth to get her PhD specifically in team science, which is cool. She serves as a founding board member of the International Network for the Science of Team Science, or INSIGHTS. She's a two-term board member for the Arctic Research Consortium of the United States, a recently elected board member of the Environmental and Energy Technology Council of Maine. And fun fact to know and tell, she is one of the big reasons that Intereach exists, because the first time that I ever went to a Science of Team Science conference, both of us kept getting the message, oh, you've got to meet this other person. And when we finally met each other, we're like, oh, we have the same thing. So both of us have been on this journey from the beginning for each other. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Veazey and welcome you all into a conversation with all of us here. So thank you, Pips. Take it away.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you everybody for joining today. I'm going to dive right in. So this is a little bit of a story of my journey, but then also kind of a prompt to a question about, how do we as team scientists shape the future of higher education? And I hope to have a little bit of a conversation about that later. So I'm going to dive into the PowerPoint and share my screen here, the right one. And before I start, there have been a couple times where one in particular where my slides were blurry, and I just want to make sure that they look okay right now.
They look great to me.
Okay, great. So so thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Christine. It has been so lovely to be part of this group and to be part of the Team Science Network. I did an interdisciplinary PhD a number of years ago and really kind of focused on leadership and management of large team projects. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I do want to just very quickly introduce myself. Like many of you probably, I have a very kind of circuitous path to the work that I'm doing here. It started out, I was really interested in psychology as an undergrad, so I got an undergrad degree in psychology. I spent a lot of time in Alaska working on the water. I was a commercial fisherwoman for several years on that boat in the upper right. It's an old halibut schooner, and we fished in the Bering Sea for halibut. I spent a bunch of time working on the Exxon Valdez when it ran into Bly Reef, which was just around the corner where I was working at that time.
This forward, hold here.
And oh, thanks. Yeah, oh, great. And then did my master's degree in oceanography, and I spent about 3 years between Greenland, which is the middle picture on the bottom, and Antarctica on the left. Drilling ice cores and looking at sea ice mostly. I love to sail and ski, and I've spent about 12 years as a stay-at-home mom, and I think that's kind of important in my story because that's, I spent a lot of my time raising girls who are now all in their 20s and out in the world doing things that they want to be doing. So my research focuses on the practice of large team science leadership. And what I really wanted to understand was, what did experts in the field think were important in terms of competencies? And some of them are kind of the ones that you might expect, like project management and communication, which is the bottom one. And this is just a concept map of the 120 different concepts that experienced team science leaders thought were important to know or to be able to do. And I was really interested in the idea that this shared leadership, personal competence, social competence, those interpersonal skills were really important in being an effective team science leader and manager. And so over the last 15 years, I've been thinking about building capacity in the state of Alaska, where I was working, and spent a lot of time bringing kind of the research on interdisciplinary teams and these competencies that were identified through my research, and building these spaces where teams could operate in a different kind of way. And that's the visualization space. So bringing people together to address complex ideas and solve these global challenges that we're all facing, and do it in a cross-disciplinary manner in which people are in a space that really serves to foster those conversations. So now for the last little over a year, I've been working at the University of Maine in Portland, which is about 2 hours south of our research campus, which is in Orono. So we are developing these strategies to connect the city of Portland and the surrounding towns and surrounding areas where the economic drivers of the state reside with Orono, which is 2 hours north, which is where the majority of research, not all, but the majority of research at the university system is happening. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story about taking this job and shifting from Alaska to Maine, shifting from a team science leader to somebody who's really thinking more about the capacity of the state and the whole system. So you might ask, what is a gateway? This is a question that rang through my head, rang through my head every day for about a year. What is a gateway? And I thought about this as I sat at my desk and as I spoke to colleagues, and I walked across Portland, I took the ferry to work, I drove to Orono, what is a gateway? And this was a sometimes terrifying question because I am actually the director of the gateway. And so I developed this mantra, which I've shared with many of you, to kind of get a hold of my fear, doubled down on this COVID mantra of staying curious. So this is what I told myself every day: stay curious, ask questions, explore ideas, invite people to conversations, try to understand some of the possibilities, and stay engaged with people. So building the gateway, I wanted to build a gateway that made sense to people who need the gateway, to the ideas that need the gateway, and just prompted myself to try to stay curious and keep asking questions. So if you look up gateway on the internet, it states that a gateway is a means of access or an entry to a place. And I also see it as a kind of a warm welcome to a conversation, one that asks us maybe to suspend our own sense of belief and engage with our partners to create something new. And I think this is one of our superpowers as Intereach professionals, this idea of welcoming people, of listening to people, of suspending our beliefs and trying to develop a larger effort. So I'm going to tell you about a story about moving to Maine, my move to Maine, and starting to work for the university. So this is day one of the job. I meet somebody in Maine, an amazing human being doing great work. And that person has a friend, and they introduced me to this person, also doing great work and thinking about Maine and other places. Their friends and colleagues are kind of spread across the state, and there's more people to meet and more people to understand. They're generous inviting because they're Mainers, so that number of people grows. And some of the people are connected to one another through work. They talk and maybe they work together or work out together, or they attend social events, or they serve on boards together. Some of them are more tightly connected than others, as represented by some of the darker lines between the circles. And some of them form maybe small groups or communities of practice. Now, this probably looks really familiar to all of us who are involved with team science and doing the jobs that are reflected by this Intereach community. So typically, we're working with and for research, for and in research teams within a university, or maybe even teams that span multiple universities and include communities in that kind of the broadest sense of that term. So this represents a community of practice in Maine with various strengths of connections within it. And in our world of team science, the community of practice has this level of porosity. That is to say, ideas and people flow in and out. So people come and people go, and they explore and they bring new ideas back to the team. That's good. Engaging with new people and new ideas is great, and one of the elements of a successful research team. And that porosity is represented by this dotted line. And some organizations are really porous and can create opportunity. And that can create opportunity, but it can also increase the complexity for the management and leadership and the focus of the organization and strategic planning. So there's pros and cons to some of that porosity. Their boundaries are fluid, and so people can come and go and cross that boundary easily, and maybe it's even encouraged. But other organizations might not be as porous, and maybe there's different reasons for that. Maybe it's a highly technical team or top secret or limited in scope, but sometimes it's because they lack awareness and they're focused inward. Or maybe they don't have a culture of collaboration, or leadership doesn't know how to promote these shared opportunities with others. So that idea led me to think about the gateway as a verb. And believe me, now we talk about gatewaying things all the time. And I kind of like being a verb. A verb just is kind of a little more exciting than a noun, I think. So we're facing these really complex challenges in Maine, and they correspond to lots of scenarios all across the world. What we learn here is relevant to other places around the planet, and what we bring from away is important as well. And I originally thought, like, okay, well, everybody in the state is my stakeholder, so I need to figure out ways to help the communities connect with the university. And I think I'm kind of focusing more on people who actually want to be leaders, educators, and innovators. So Mainers who are curious. And I think that's maybe my stakeholder group, people who are curious and want to explore. So the gateway is this invitation to co-create, an invitation to Maine's leaders, educators, and innovators, an invitation to the deep pool of imaginative and scholarly leaders within the university, and building something together for the future of the planet by educating future leaders, innovators, and educators. So I like the idea that I'm a verb now. And if we return to this idea of many communities practice with these varying boundary types, we can see how the gateway might do several things. First, it might spark new connections because we're deliberate and co-creating opportunities with our partners. The gateway might be a part of unexpected sparks that happen because we're open to new ideas and working with thought leaders in a variety of different sectors. So maybe not something that we're planning, but something that we stumble across. And then third, the gateway might benefit from sparks created by others and pass them on to other systems. So just kind of thinking about how the gateway and this work corresponds to other organizations and places that are doing great things in Maine. I see the optimal scenario, the biggest spark coming from intentional partnerships where we're all working together toward a common goal. And there's lots of people engaged in sparking, intentional sparks at the University of Maine. And I just want to kind of mention here, one of the people who is going to be doing lots of sparking is Ann Heberger Marino. Some of you may know her, but I have the incredibly good fortune of now working with her because she's joined the Gateway as the associate director. So super, just amazingly thrilled that that she is here with me. I knew I was going to go too far in this. So I want to bring us to this slide that Christine Hendren has developed, and it's relevant to our work as Intereach professionals. And I think everything I do, I think is all within the context of this Intereach group. And many of you have seen this slide before, but I'm just going to say it one more time. So the purpose is to articulate and promote the need for a dedicated career path around interdisciplinary research expertise, and to improve practitioners' tools, best practices, success metrics, and career trajectories. So this is kind of what our group is talking about. So my question to this group is, as we think about the future of higher education and as we see these striking changes in how institutions are reinventing themselves, how are we engaging in that conversation, and what does that mean to us, and where can we be leaders? I always like to say that we didn't plan to be here 50 years ago. We didn't say, oh, the University of Maine is going to be the perfect thing 50 years from now, and that's where we're going to end up in 2022. And I imagine that most of the universities and institutions that you're all working with did not say the same thing 50 years ago. Like, this is a really intentional project, and we're going to enter, we're going to end up with this bureaucracy that is just perfect to serve the people of our states. These things emerged over many decades. To me, they feel sometimes chaotic, ever-changing, certainly emerging now as lots of things in higher education are changing. So how do we want to define higher education now? How do we define higher education and research that's inclusive and responds to the needs of people? And I think that we're all thinking about this in one form or another in our jobs. So I hope that the rest of this time together is just a time that we can have this conversation, and this is an invitation to a dialogue about the future and developing partnerships now. I think it's going to take all of us to do this, and why would Intereach not be an organization that is kind of leading the way to think about the future of higher education and our research universities. So I wanted to just give a couple of examples that I found in putting this together in the last couple of days about how some people are thinking differently about the future of higher education. Arizona State University was a university that I learned of probably a couple decades ago, and Michael Crow was there thinking about this interdisciplinary approach to education and to the organization of a research university. Recently, he wrote this note in Elsevier Connect, and he talks about a research grade higher education and the advent of scalable online educational technologies. I think we're all really adept at the online educational technologies, and if we're not adept, we're becoming more adept. And we're certainly learning things still, but the pandemic really pushed us to become experts in that immediately. So that was kind of this immediate turning point where universities went from in-person to online almost overnight. So we're all getting really good at doing that. There's a school in London, and I'm just mentioning it because my middle daughter is spending a year there, and it's such a different experience than I had as a graduate student. And they promote this, what they call an agile approach to higher education and a radical alternative to marketization and arcane specialism. And my daughter Liv talks about this a lot, and it's really, she talks about the professors and students all being in conversation, developing things as they go. They describe it as a non-hierarchical gathering of academics and students forged in conviviality and trust. And some of those words seem kind of Intereachy to me. They seem kind of team sciencey to me. Especially the idea of co-developing things as, with communities. And then somebody has sent me this last week. This is a piece in Issues in Science and Technology called The Global Movement for Engaged Research. And it's another one of those moments where I'm like, wow, these are really smart people thinking about the future of higher education and research. What should we be taking away from that, and how can we incorporate some of this thinking, and what do we want to incorporate into into how we are serving as Intereach professionals across the country and across the world. This group talks about the mismatch between research knowledge that is produced and the socially robust knowledge that is needed to address the challenges facing coming generations. And they talk about engaged research, which I think is absolutely really right along it parallels nicely the conversations that we've had in Intereach for a long time. And so it's just kind of interesting to me. We've been having these conversations for a long time, and these things are showing up in literature right now, 2022. And what could we be doing as an Intereach group, and how do we want to think about this? This is an article that I helped to co-author in a very small way.
Pips? Good. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure it was advancing correctly for you.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Okay, so here. Sorry about that. I was looking at all the faces and forgetting to advance. So let me just, before I do that, let me just go back a couple. So the New School of the Anthropocene was kind of that radical approach, and you have that link there. the global movement for engaged research was the idea of this engaged research. So there is the citation there. And then this idea of consortia, tackling the world's problems and starting with this idea of a minimum viable consortia. And I talk about that idea all the time. That really resonates with people, especially people that we tend to work with in big science teams. Like, who do we really need at the table to start a project? Who really needs to be in the conversations to get things going? So this is an article that I played a small role in. I'm listed as an author, but really it was Joel Kutcher-Gershenfeld and others who are working in this space right now. This is actually one of the, I think it's like one of the 10 most downloaded articles from the Stanford Social Innovation Review over the last year. And people are looking at ways of developing consortia among all sorts of different organizations, and higher ed is just one of those sectors that are thinking about consortia. And again, this is kind of like a new, maybe in my mind, a new way of thinking about higher education. So rather than competing with each other head to head for resources, what kind of consortia are being developed? And there's all sorts of examples of data consortia that are underway, that are successful, and people are agreeing to share data at the beginning of a big project and really being very specific about what that means. So that idea of a consortia model is really resonates with me. I guess back to thinking about my job particularly, and would love to know if anybody else is kind of working on these things. We are, one of the things I'm most interested and most excited about at the University of Maine right now is this interdisciplinary problem-solving partnership that a number of us have come together to address. So it's the Graduate School of Business, the Maine Law School, the Public Service School, and then a number of different research entities that have kind of signed on to say, yeah, we're interested in this. So we're in discussions with a small group of leaders. I think there's about 10 of us who want to formally establish this program focused on solving complex problems in Maine and elsewhere, and would be an inclusive approach across our entire university system, which is made up of 7 different universities, to develop global leaders with the expertise to solve complex problems. And that's been just such a fun thing to kind of think about and to help promote, and challenging in all the ways that a large bureaucracy, I'm sure, is challenging. So that was just kind of the introduction to the rest of our time together, and I really hoped it would kind of spark some conversation. And so these questions that I've kind of put up here, not only do we have incredible teams that connect and span activities and build capacity, but many of us have the great fortune of being in these places that we love to be, working for universities that we really believe in. And there's so many good things going on right now, but there's also some huge challenges. So the questions I had for us as a group, and hope to maybe talk a little bit about, are things like, how do we as Intereach professionals spark engagement? What are we doing to spark engagement in all sorts of different ways? And what have you done or seen that's worked well? And how do we want to think about using our skills to advance this idea of higher education and research and building capacity? So that's what I had for the formal part of the presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing and would love to just hear your ideas and have a conversation about some of the cool things that are happening across the country, and if any of these ideas resonated with you. And then also, what could we see doing as an Intereach organization?
Well, thank you so much for that, Pips. That was really interesting and great to see your thought pattern in approaching what was kind of a wide open, mandate to just connect us up, make a portal. So that's really amazing. I'll just offer to help moderate so that people feel comfortable. You can raise your physical hand, or you can raise your reaction emoji hand. And Pips has kind of opened the floor for questions, comments, directional input. So please feel free. Well, I can break the ice and kick it off because I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just lead with this one. So I'm curious if you have developed, I don't know, nothing as formal as a heuristic, but were there patterns you noticed about how to prioritize, given that you had Connect Anywhere that makes us bigger and better as your kind of your charge? Were there ways that you found to kind of develop a compass toward what should you choose? And then similarly, what should you go away from or deprioritize? Because I'm sure the way your brain works and the way all the possibilities are, there were probably 1,000 directions that you could go in. And when we hop around like a little bunny, then we go in none of them, right? So how did you decide what to do first? And how did you decide when to turn down something that was possible, but not a priority?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, because my boss will say your job is to represent the University of Maine in Portland, and I continue to say, Cody, you're freaking me out every time you tell me that, because that just sounds somewhat impossible. But I think, having been on the job a little more than a year, I think it was about the 3-month mark where the explorations phase kind of had to turn into something more concrete, because there were starting to be so many requests for, can you help us think about this? Can you facilitate this? How would we bring these teams together? And promoting the idea of team science through the Gateway and as a connector and a facilitator, and trying to think of another way to kind of talk about the work that we do. Because it is definitely embedded in facilitation. It's helping to bring people together, helping people find ways to connect with each other, offering people ideas that seem to resonate from one field to another. And we've all kind of done some of that, I think. But for me, one of the things that our president wanted the Gateway to focus on was the connection with businesses. So right now, when I start a project, I always say, how are students engaged and how are businesses engaged, or how could businesses be engaged? And, that's one of the things that it's one of those kind of breaks between what the university traditionally does and what communities do, and how people go about living their lives. It's been challenging to try to connect the university to communities, and it kind of gets back to a whole lot of things, some of which are the promotion and tenure and what people are paid to do at a university. And I spent a day at a community nearby Portland, and the economic development director for that town said, we would love to connect with the university. And he sent me a 3-page email about, here are the different departments that could be helping me. These are the kinds of topics that I need help with. And it's really hard to go back to the university and say, these are the kinds of things that we need, because we as university people, we get funding for grants, and we look for different ways of getting money, and then we develop these programs and these projects. And to try to kind of knit together the immediate needs of a community and the universities that we're sitting in, I'm finding challenging right now. And I think that's kind of what sparked the idea of this interdisciplinary problem-solving partnership as a mechanism to try to connect communities with universities in a different kind of way. And I've had, many conversations with people about this idea and different ways people are approaching that. But just kind of rethinking how we could do this in a very different way I'm really excited to kind of try some things. So getting back to your question, Christine, I think there's a lot of ways. I really wanted to try to help connect the university to things that are relevant to people that they're grappling with. And that could be businesses, it could be municipalities, it could be nonprofit organizations, but always kind of thinking about what are students getting out of this and how are we helping to connect, Mainers and businesses. So I don't have the perfect answer to that yet, but it's a constant question in my mind.
That was really, it seems like a perfect answer to me, because it's sort of this dual mission that you're kind of asking yourself, am I serving students? Am I serving this? And you do have a compass to go by, and you can only do so many things at a time. So that's fascinating. I love all those models. I see Andrea's hand up. Andrea, would you like to offer your comment or question?
Yeah, I just, I'm just wondering if, when you said it's really hard to connect people and to get, you see lots of opportunities and possibilities, but then getting like the faculty at your university to see that those opportunities kind of go along well with what their work is and what their personal priorities are could be a challenge. And I just wonder if there's a certain kind of like ice-breaking phase or effort that has to happen first, and if that's different from then like kind of building some other connections. And I just wanted to know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point, Andrea. Most of the work that I have done so far has been within a program or within a project. So you have a bunch of people coming together to agree to do a project, or you have a program that's offering things and people want to come together and do that. So that's an opportunity to co-create something, right? You have lots of smart people and they wanted to develop something together. It's a little more challenging to go to visit a community. This is not my expertise, so this is why I'm talking about it. To visit a community who says, our mill shut down, we don't have good jobs, we are investing in sustainable energy, we're trying to build our economy, and we need help from the university. And to try to develop that team with the structure of the university currently is kind of challenging. Like, I spend a lot of time working with people on projects and developing proposals where everybody at the table is coming around to do that, and they're excited because they want to do it. They're going to be rewarded by getting the proposal, have funding to work on it, and they're going to run off and be a great team. That feels different to me than creating this trying to co-create something outside the university and inside the university. And I've done that a lot with science grants, but when somebody outside the university says, we need help with this, that's been a bigger challenge of trying to figure out how to do that. How do you get funding? How do you find faculty who have time and motivation? How do they get funded? How do they, reap the reward of doing that? How do they get promoted by doing that? Some of the faculty that I work with have zero service time, not necessarily, not entirely just at Maine, but, across the country, they don't have time for service. So then it turns into a research project, but then you need money for the research project. It's this long established way that universities, I think, have rewarded and built the structure for academics. And I'm finding it challenging to make those connections.
I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the chat conversation with Clint, noting that building relationships both on and off campus seems really key to this. And Kenan offers that doing an amorphous ask for help may seem impossible or nearly so. So I see Jenny's hand up, but because I'm kind of going to the chat, I wondered if Kenan, if you would, or Clint, would you like to expound on your questions and comments as well?
Not for me. I'd just like to hear the questions that are about to be posed.
Perfect. Okay. And then Clint, because I just called out what you said, if you wanted to follow up on that, and then Jenny.
Well, and to me, it does seem, particularly being new to the campus environment, it's a lot of meeting and greeting, right? It's building all the relationships and following up and kind of, I don't know, keeping a Rolodex of who can do what, right? And what are the needs. But as the conversation is going, it almost makes me wonder, there can be so much potential in 2 to 3 years around these. Like, to me, it's almost like seed grant funding, but there's no seed grant. It's let's build and form, and then just kind of keep going where the need or the problem goes. So I'll be quiet and keep listening. Good conversation.
Oh, I love that idea, Clint. I am a great fan of seed grants, and actually my first year at the Gateway offered a series of seed grants called Converge Maine, which was all about trying to bring people together across disciplines to address a specific problem in Maine. And they had to work with communities, and we got some great proposals out of that. So I think that that is a great way of kind of having that's a great mechanism for bringing people together. Yeah, and I think a lot of the challenge comes down to, to funding. And I know that, philanthropists and federal agencies are thinking differently about funding. And I hope that continues to change, because I think we really need to, I think the idea of co-creating things with our community partners is really important. And that doesn't always fit the typical 90-day funding cycle of, hey, we're going to put a call out and you have 90 days to develop a relationship and write a proposal. And I think we all know that that's challenging, right? That's not a new thing. But there's got to be other opportunities and other ways of bringing people together to do this important work. And connecting our universities to different opportunities where people really need help.
Thank you. Jenny, you have been patient, and we would love to hear your question.
Oh, well, actually, I just wanted to say I love the minimum viable consortia, and I'm finding, so I work at the Translational Data Analytics Institute at Ohio State, and it's all about driving or supporting team science, interdisciplinary team science. And it seems like it all comes down to time. So the amount of time it takes for teams to form and to land on an idea that involves some of them, if not all of them, but also getting people's attention and getting time on their calendar, because the team building and the socializing and all of that stuff that happens internally to a team, it doesn't have immediate payoff, as you're saying. And I think with, so that's what we usually call that interdisciplinary. When it involves the community, then people tend to call it, I hear them now calling it transdisciplinary, which takes even more time. And I think we've been making the case, as in addition to providing seed grants, and actually, Pips, you just gave me a new name for a grant, the Converge. I can't believe I've missed that word. But we've been providing not just funding, but staff support, which is kind of what everybody's after anyway, to get these different types of specialties together to get to know each other and then go for external opportunities. But what we've also been doing is providing training for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary faculty who are going for tenure and promotion to make the case in their dossiers for the kind of the level of production that this kind of slower process results in, and really advocating for the results and the amount of time it takes to put into it. So I just kind of wanted to say I'm really glad to hear your talk and your approach, and I think the minimal viable consortia is where it starts, because then you can get that moving a lot easier than trying to get everybody, like 20 people around. And then once people see things moving, I think the snowball effect is really a lot more reliable than trying to convene and then move. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jenny. I've used minimum viable consortia. It has saved me several times when when it would be fun to have a larger team at the table, but just over years of doing some of this work, it just makes so much sense to have the key players. And in my mind, I regularly ask, is everybody represented somehow? Are the few people who are at the table, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, depending on the group, are the few people who are at the table representing everybody that you want to have represented? Because I think that's a really important question to ask. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to be at the table, and maybe at some point everybody is at the table, but you have to get things started. And so this community that I was telling you about, I think there were 4 of us that went to visit the community. I was the only person from the university, but that felt kind of the right place to start that conversation. And I agree, promotion tenure is a really hard thing to address in some of the work that we're doing, because people don't get rewarded for some of the things that and we've had this conversation many times. And so thinking about that criteria, there are certainly universities who are doing a good job of that and have been over the last decade of expanding promotion tenure criteria. And I hope that that kind of continues. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ooh, I'll have to look at that book, Christine. I love the title.
Oh, yes, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. I really liked it because it flips, similar to the minimum viable consortium idea. It flips exclusion in your mind from being exclusive and maybe hurtful, or, you know, not what we're trying to do in teaming, into a mode for protecting the time of the people that are there and protecting the mission, and an intentionality. So it's a positive for a parsimony's sake, rather than what we can often think of knee jerk as a negative, because shouldn't we have everybody, you know, democratically doing things? So one thing, it's just a brief idea so that it doesn't flutter away if other people hear it, is I wonder if it wouldn't be interesting to have a bank of seed funding calls, because we do, my institute does a seed funding program, and we're always playing with what should we indicate is a metric for, you know, competitiveness or success, and how, you know, it's called concert. So conducting complex research together. So we want to like work together on things, but I noticed yours saying, you know, it has to also have a community partner or a, you know, a translational aspect to the application of the research. It'd be interesting if we could just crowdsource what are all the seed funds out there. And it's one of those classic, like somebody should do this, but we have a postdoc coming on board soon to do convergence research. And so maybe that could be something, if people are interested in sharing. I know that I would happily read other seed funding calls.
Yes, and the Insights Exploratory Committee on the Toolkit is noticing a real opportunity, kind of a low-hanging fruit opportunity for the SIGs, of which Intereach is one, to help populate some initial resources around team science by like posting some resources that are relevant to their SIG. So maybe, you know, a link to a Google spreadsheet with seed funding calls. So the Toolkit Committee may be able to help Intereach soon have an actual place where to post that and share that.
That would be fantastic. I have my own little file because, you know, over the years, I've had to, you know, draft all the paperwork that goes along with offering a seed grant, and it's not insignificant. So making sure some of those words are right, and the criteria, and helping the reviewers understand what the criteria is, and finding the reviewers with the right expertise to review, you know, kind of broad and interdisciplinary seed grants. It's all part of it. So I think that's a great idea, and would be happy to contribute. Yeah.
Are other people percolating some comments? Or
I have a thought, question, comment, discussion topic. I'm not real sure. That's why I didn't raise my hand. Pip, something I'm encountering at institutions across the country right now are there opportunities to form teams around seed funding, big grants, things like that, center proposals, and no one wants to volunteer to lead. And they're like, I'm too busy. I've got too much going on. And I've got VPR offices going, I've got project management support. I'll pay for this. And people are still like, I don't have time. I don't want to do that. Do you, or does anyone else have thoughts or comments or similar experiences? I'm curious.
I will answer and then keep my answers short so other people can speak as well. But 100% that is my experience as well. There are these opportunities that are coming up, and there's more and more big things, or I'm seeing more and more big things from federal agencies, you know, whether it's NSF or the Economic Development Administration. I mean, there are so many large grant opportunities right now, and they take an immense amount of time and effort. And I think people, certainly the people across the country that I'm connecting with are feeling burned out, are feeling like they can't do one more huge lift like that. And I'm not sure what to tell people who are shying away from those opportunities, because it is a huge amount of work. And if there's a small percentage, you're kind of questioning, like, do I really want to, you know, put all this time and effort into something that has a small percentage of success when there are other things to do. And again, I can think that part of that gets back to promotion and tenure and what you're, you know, what you're getting paid to do. What does your effort look like? Hey, Nicole.
Hi. So I just want to add to that. So I work for an organization that primarily exists to give out seed grants. And we've had a really hard time getting people to sign on or make proposals to very low seed grants. So $15,000, $20,000, because it's so much work. It's so much work on the proposal end. It's so much work on the institutional level to do all the paperwork, which there's tons of. And it's really painful on our side too, approving all the invoices. And it's just such a time-consuming thing that we've given out 3 rounds of seed grants over the past 2 years, and we had to keep upping the amount just to make it worth people's time. It's just so labor intensive. And as you have all said, there's a lot of other things going on with people. You know, they don't have time for service, they don't have time for this and that. And so it's, you know, it's great to have these seed grants and make them available, but if people don't have time, then there seems to be some structural issues with how do we make it easier to give money and get money and spend the money? Because as the project manager, I'm spending way more time than I expected telling people to spend their money and making sure that their money is spent properly and that the institutions are, you know, giving and processing those invoices. And so seed grants sound like such a great idea, and they're so useful, and everybody wants money. But the reality of it, it's really hard to do. It should be easier. I don't have an explanation beyond, you know, this is my experience, but I have a feeling it's other people's experience too. And I have a solution, but I just wanted to put that out there.
I'm curious if this feels different post-COVID. And I'm curious about whether it feels different post-COVID for the same kind of opportunities that were pre-COVID, or if there are different opportunities that people are kind of shying away from now. And I think about some of the really big, you know, engines and EDA proposals that or opportunities that we've seen that maybe didn't exist a few years ago. I mean, STCs and ERCs and those were around, but there's other really large opportunities that weren't there before. So, Kenan. Hi, Kenan.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I thought there was a meeting and then I looked everywhere. I'm so sorry I missed the first half, but I watched the recording. I just want to call out that in my world, when you have a set of fundamental structural issues, it occurs to me that this is what it looks like. So the fundamental structural issue that I might call out here is this idea of having a container where you're wanting people to compete for whether or not you select them as worthy of the monies and funding, et cetera, as whatever agency you are, NSF or whatever. is very different than taking someone or a group of someone's and nurturing them to succeed. And that's a structural bone set in the system. And when you look at where that pushes the system up against failure points or cracks, this is what I think those look like, those cracks look like. So just making that comment.
Thanks, Ken. And I always appreciate your the way that your brain works and processes some of these things, and it comes out in a slightly different way than I was thinking about them. So I mean, you know, I think one of the things that I think a lot about is, you know, we create the structures and then the structures create us. And it's just, you know, it's this circular economy of research, and you know, how do you kind of sidestep that when something maybe isn't working, and that takes a lot of momentum to shift that wheel. But it seems like that we have this opportunity now, and I'm going to challenge Intereach to kind of like step in and try to pull some ideas together about how we see research and the future of higher education and what it means to be an Intereach professional. I mean, it's so interesting, this conversation. I didn't anticipate that the conversation would come around seed grants and the opportunity and the idea that people are feeling tired right now and they don't want another huge proposal to write. And that's kind of what we're offering. And that mismatch, I think, is maybe kind of solidified in this conversation for me.
Agreed. Andrea, would you like to make a comment or addition?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the conversation about, you know, the challenges of implementing seed grants. You know, I know that, you know, some other people have used models where, you know, they're effectively seed grants, but they're completely run out of kind of like the central office instead. So instead of saying, you know, you kind of get the services that you want them to have, and then it's all financially managed kind of in-house. So that makes it, that helps add to the accountability and gives you a little more control, and you don't have to chase people down and try and be like, what did you spend it on? Did you spend it on the right thing? And It's just kind of like, you know, all that kind of happens on the inside. So, you know, that's a model that I would like to play with, you know, just because maybe sometimes faculty don't know exactly what they need. But if you kind of have yourself engaged in that way, could make things easier. I don't 100% know.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Yeah, and the thing that you said, Pips, is where my brain went, is just that people are exhausted after COVID. They've recalibrated. Anything extra is a no. You know, our seed funding program that I mentioned, and our offers for help and coaching and nurturing a team through, we have not had takers. So the model that has worked is if I am able to bring in money as an integration and implementation specialist, an I2S co-PI, then I'm working on models to pass that funding through and give out a bite-sized chunk that worked for a faculty member. So it's more like catch the fish and pass it out. That has been, in the last couple of years, the only model that has been successful. There are faculty that write it, but they were going to do that without me. They were just on their own engine, you know. So I'm curious if, and I see we're closing. I knew this would be an amazing discussion led by such a great host. Jenny, would you like to make your comment in our last few minutes?
Well, yeah, I just I want to say I think I have found the people being maxed out, and I do think there's some COVID you know, effects, but I actually have found it to be an opportunity to start with these tiny little ideas, these little gatherings where it's like no commitment. We're just going to talk about, you know, the area of research that you've devoted your whole life. You don't have to sign up for anything or do any additional work, but you're going to get totally hooked. And you start with those minimal viable consortia. But I've noticed to get people to lead large grants, they have to be at the place in their career where they're ready to lead an organization, because that's what the large grants turn into, really. I mean, it's a you are now delegating and you're hiring people that'll do a lot of the work. So it's really career stage specific, I've found. But going back to these little turning, kind of starting small so that people find it like bite-sized chunks, we're actually taking some of our seed grant ideas and turning them down a couple $1,000s and making planning grants to help develop proposals that could then go for seed grants. So we are like really paring down the commitment level. And yeah, I'm going to kind of build snowballs out of that. But yeah, so that was like a two-pronged comment.
That's great, Jenny. Thank you. And I just a quick comment to the planning grant. I was talking to a PI the other day. He's like, now I have to write the stupid planning grant first. I was like,
I say a one-page proposal, one-page description even. Yeah.
I said, well, we can do some fun things with the planning grant too. So yeah, but it is kind of funny. I love your idea of starting small. It's that like that minimum viable, whatever, consortia, product, whatever, start small and build. And I think the other thing to add to the conversation is that understanding like what people need right now and trying to help address those, whether they're the needs for a career or needs for what they're doing at home and what their lives like, understanding what people like need and want right now is something that I spend a lot of time doing, thinking about and listening, and it's a fun part of the job, but it doesn't always translate to the grant. And nice, I just wanted to recognize lots of Carmen's comments too, and completely resonate with a lot of the things that there's Carmen. Hey Carmen, thank you for your
Hi,
help. These
everyone.
are great.
Thank you. I run a $15 million center grant. So when the RIE came up, we were like, let's go for it. Ow.
Yeah.
We had to say no.
Right, I've been in exactly your shoes. Thinking that would be so fun. There's no possible way. Yeah.
Well, I knew that this would come to the very end of our hour very quickly. And just want to thank you so much, Pips, for not only your sharing your wisdom and your story, but also kind of challenging us as a group to step up to the mic and figure out how we can be part of Reimagining. I also want to say for anybody who was not here, this was Christine Glauber's due date, but she actually has a little baby girl a couple weeks ago. Tessa Judith Sanseri is with us in the world now. So that's why Christine is not here, but it's awesome. So that's some happy, beautiful news. Feel free to reach out to her if you want to. And she'll be back with us whenever it makes sense. But also we'll ask Pips later for what the follow-up might be to this, if we have a reading that we might want to explore together, maybe this minimum viable consortia or whatever Pips kind of recommends. That's what we'll be gathering to chat about in 2 weeks for those who can join. And then we'll be back next month with the next in our series. We'll have some folks doing vertically integrated research projects from Duke across vertically integrated, meaning like college sophomores up to, emeritus professors in project groups together. So thank you so much, Pips. And thank you everybody for your time. This is always my favorite. It's wonderful to see all of you.
Me too. And I'm always happy to see these wonderful, beautiful faces. Thank you so much, Christine and Jenny. And I will send a congratulations to Christine Glauber.
So
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Christine. Good to see everybody.
thank you, Pips. Bye.
Thank you, Pips.
Bye.